As a therapist, aka a licensed state agent, I can sit here and tell you the Western paradigm of psychology, whether you are a therapist, a social worker, a psychologist, it doesn't work. And it's not going to be in the future, right? Not to say that therapy will go away, but how we view therapy and care in our systems have got to be shifted. They've got to be dismantled because it's not working just as is by itself. The future of therapy really is mutual aid, right? It is being able to collectively organize in our small pods, right? And actually radically care for each other. That is the future. More and more spaces are popping up with therapists who have divested from licensure because of the harm it has committed, right? And I'm one of those therapists who have considered divesting for licensure over the next few years, right? Because right now having a license, it doesn't necessarily put us in a position of necessarily being the helpers that we can, but instead relying and operating as an extension of the state. And this is not comfortable for a therapist to hear. We kind of get defensive sometimes. People are like, no, we don't do that. But the reality is, most cops don't actively go out to harm people initially, right? But we can do the same thing. We're just adjacent to them. We are a proximity. We work with them, right? We help support them in a way. When I say this with the utmost compassion and love, okay? So, right now, if your nervous system is experiencing overwhelm, right? Maybe anxiety, fear, panic, right? We may be also experiencing depression, grief, right? And restlessness, right? Not being able to feel like quite grounded sometimes, right? Some of us already party dissociated. I want to invite you to listen to your body and to explore it deeper. Your nervous system will reflect the state of the world, and that is not a negative thing. We're so taught to try to be in these states of calm or trying to control our overall emotions around situations, right? Especially when we talk about systemic oppression, fascism, imperialist state violence. When we think about trying to control our body's responses, we are replicating the same harm within these systems that tell us that our emotions and feelings are not valid. And the reality is they are valid, and your nervous system has one job. It is to protect you, okay? Your body is trying to protect you, even if it doesn't feel like it. So I want to invite you in the middle of all of this, allow yourself to feel what comes up. And that doesn't mean not to resource and care for yourself, but feeling your emotions is going to be your most powerful tool to help you and push forward. So, right now, as therapists, I don't think we should be jumping in to reframe people's thoughts around the current situation, the current real live threat that's literally happening as we speak. I'm already seeing therapists and therapy groups talking about, hey, just validate and reframe people's thoughts. When we do that, we're literally, I hate to use this term very lightly, but we're gaslighting individuals because the reality is you can't CBT out of fascism, imperialism, and state violence. Right now, we need to be really focusing on holding space for grief because there's a lot of grief showing up within our nervous systems, right? And as a collective, there's a lot of grief, right? We need to be helping individuals to learn their rights, right? We need to help individuals to understand and mobilize into grassroots organizations, right? Maybe helping folks to connect to mutual aid, right? And if your therapy clients don't know about mutual aid, wait, can we learn about educating, right, about mutual aid and how that can be supportive and healing, right? And as a form of way to connect and deepen community relationships. Right now, we just need to hold space and be with. We don't need a fix. We just gotta hang out and chill with them, honor them. Their feelings are real. It is so real. It is scary right now. And just validating that. Don't jump in to fix that. That doesn't need to be fixed. I ask, if you need a fix, what's coming up inside you? Okay, so long story short, I had a client basically come in and tell me they stole some shit. And I was like, okay, cool, let's talk about it. So I asked them, like, why, like, who's she stealing from? I'm not going to report you or anything. And they were like, it was an affluent suburb shop, like, a white woman's shop who owned crystals, like, selling them at a very, very high price. And I was like, okay, I already know who we're dealing with right now. What kind of person, possibly? And this person holds multiple marginalized identities to begin with. So this felt pretty personal to see these items to this person's culture being sold at such a high price. So they stole something. And then I said, how did that feel in your body? They said, I had agency and I felt like I had autonomy. And that's why I was like, I want you to sit with that and stay with that. Now, some therapists may have been like, how did that align with your values? Are you moving toward or away from your values? But at that moment, that person just had their autonomy and agency has been stripped from them, has been stripped from them for years, over and over and over. And that is what we need to look at. These systems that continuously push and strip and force us, right, to have to commit those acts, right? I think those are actually little radical acts, right, when you do something like that to regain your power, right? What if we were to look at our systems and how folks regain our power? Will that lead us to necessarily criminalize them as we do, even as therapists? What you're feeling right now, it is not anger, it is rage. It is not anger. It is rage. Rage is a beautiful, beautiful, spicy little child, right? As Ruth King puts it, a rage child. And I'll actually read an excerpt from Ruth King's Healing Rage, and this is also inspired by the work of Dr. Mullen from Decolonizing Therapy. So I'll read this chapter, and let's see how this lands. A rage inheritance is a bequest of unresolved rage from our parents and our ancestors. This includes generations of unresolved rage from institutions of influence, such as the family, law, politics, education, and religion, and as well from social constructions such as ethnicity, race, class, gender, and culture. So your rage child does not need to be pushed away from you. It actually wants to be held. And it wants to be nurtured and cared for, especially right now. Because the reality is your rage is also a form of resistance. Your rage has gotten shit done in the past, right? Our rage has gotten things done in the past. And it will continue to help us, right? But it's like, how can I cultivate a relationship to it? That I'm not pathologizing it, shaming it, right? Meaning with like discontent, right? That I can welcome it with love and openness, right? To be with it. Bruh, imagine being a therapist in 2025 and arguing and saying that therapy is not political. That therapy is a place that should be free of politics. In this day and age, right now, what is it? January 31st, 2025. And you're still saying that. That is not the flex or the professionalism or remaining competent in your skills as you think it is. It actually tells so much more about you. It actually says that you're like, let me separate. Let me separate clients' lives from somehow they can maybe dissociate, right? They can dissociate, or not even dissociate, but they can maybe take their issues and kind of make it palpable enough in this room that we can talk about coping skills, right? That we don't go far into politics. We can't talk about what the real life devastating like implications are happening. And let's try some reframing of thoughts. That's happening right now. At some point as therapists, we have to put aside our clinical formal training and just look at the people in front of us. And what I'm saying is not new. There has been activists, organizers, scholars, other leaders, therapists, social workers, right, peer support activists, mad scholars who've said this. We have got to put aside our clinical training and help people, because our clinical training does not always help people, especially in times like this. Here's why therapy isn't working for you, boo, and it's not because of what you think. And I'll explain to you using a little bit of neuroscience that is pretty much universally agreed upon. All right, beautiful. This is your brain. So this is part of your brain right here is the neocortical cortex, right? This part of our brain is pretty much where most of us live, right? And this is where people who are neurodivergent, this is where the executive dysfunction is also happening as well. This part of your brain is really responsible for thinking and planning, and that is what it does, right? And this is when we're in talk therapy. This is the part of the brain we're mainly using. Now, this part of our brain here, there's something here that exists that is called our amygdala, right? That is our emotional part of our brain. This is where our emotional memories, and this is where trauma becomes stored in. This part of our brain, right? So now you're seeing how talk therapy cannot literally access this part of your brain, because this is in a more deeper part, right? And just talking about it, we cannot get to this part. It's just, we literally can't. And in somatic therapy, we're trying to move from here into here, because this is how we're able to move through and become unstuck, right? Because the reality is mindset work has nothing to do with if your emotional brain is still holding on to trauma, essentially. If there's still trauma stored into the deeper parts of your system, aka the limbic system. And finally, our brainstem, right? So this is going to be our reptilian brain, right? This is the most primitive and the oldest parts of our brain. This part of our brain, this does not even understand human language. This only is responsible for, am I safe? Am I in danger? This is our sensation part of our experience, right? That is why when you're having a panic attack, you cannot tell your body to stop, because right here, it does not even understand. It is only trying to help you to survive.
I need to address the ongoing conversation about nervous system regulation, because for me, the conversation's starting to feel like really problematic and ableist, and actually a little related to goop and wellness industrial complexes. So nervous system regulation, first of all, exists on a continuum. You are not regulated or dysregulated. We all fall somewhere. There's nerves throughout our body. Some of them are really heightened. Some of them are really calm. Sometimes they're all on fire. But for the most part, our ability to regulate our nervous system has to do with levels of marginalization, access to resources. I mean, if you wake up with no money in your bank account, how are you going to have a regulated nervous system? It's not going to be from ice cubes. I'm not trying to mock the intentionality behind people who are really working to bring nervous system discourse into talking about mental health. And I also want to say that there's something inherently ableist and problematic about the discourse. To have a regulated nervous system would take being extremely well-resourced, extremely privileged, and extremely welcomed into the world. Your levels of marginalization are directly correlated to how dysregulated your nervous system is. Furthermore, if you're on the neurodivergent spectrum or not, and you have a strong sense of justice and you see what's going on in the world around you, how could your nervous system possibly be regulated? And so I'm sort of calling for the end of shaming that I feel is coming from the you need a regulated nervous system, and normalizing that that's a pretty elusive thing to get if you can get it. It's not a destination. We want to feel calmer, sure. But there's something where we're turning that back on the people whose nervous systems are dysregulating and asking them to find regulation somehow with a set of tools, rather than looking at the world around us and how deeply dysregulating it is, and how you can't calm your body amidst everything that's going on right now. That would be a real separation from society at this moment. And those of us who need to be out there and hear the noise of the world, all of it, it's hard to feel calm. It's hard to feel regulated. And sometimes I think the work is just about living alongside that painful truth, trying to find moments of reprieve, but not setting ourselves up for failure when we're in boiling water. What was once mental health care has become perverted into a large industrial complex that we now call mental health treatment. And the care isn't there anymore. Instead, there's a drive for profits, outcomes, quantitative accomplishments where somebody's inner world has somehow become measurable for insurance industries to dictate whether or not they want to keep paying whoever's providing services. In this industrial complex of mental health treatment, there are several fallacies, and among them are the ones that have to do with evidence-based practice. And I'm going to talk a lot about, over time, deconstructing multiple evidence-based practices, but in this particular instance, I just want to address cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. I'd address the notion that it is actually quite harmful for people who are suffering with complex trauma. So some of the major impacts of complex trauma are that we lose a relationship with reality and that we can't really tell if our inner gut is reading the room right. We sort of have a complex relationship with truth, like we don't really know what feelings of ours can be trusted or not trusted, when we're safe, when we're not safe. And we also feel like probably we're affording a little bit too much grace to the people who have hurt us. And what cognitive behavioral therapy asks us to do is, one, disregard our feelings, which are things that we actually have already problematically lost touch with and deeply need to reconnect with. Two, to challenge our thoughts, which we're already doing obsessively because we lost contact with the certainty that we once had before the trauma happened to us. And it asks us to frequently question black and white thinking and pathologizes black and white thinking when it is actually black and white thinking that would allow us to set the boundaries we need with the people who have hurt us most. And the amount of gray thinking that we've allowed the people who have hurt us up until this point is only exposing us to more hurt. So when somebody says, here's CBT for complex trauma, just wonder if that's helping, harming, or telling somebody, well, to stop feeling exactly what they need to know about themselves. Trauma-informed CBT is an oxymoron. It is not possible to conduct cognitive behavioral therapy in a way that is truly trauma-informed. I understand there is the existence of TFCBT, which is a 15-week manualized program which is supposed to relieve people of their trauma symptoms. And maybe for a little while it does, but not over the long term. What people really need in response to trauma, and in this particular instance I'm referring to PTSD and CPTSD. I want to point out first that I think that there's a false binary between these two things. There's very few people who don't have CPTSD who have experienced trauma. In addition to that, the things that somebody who has experienced CPTSD really need in a therapist, somebody who is willing to provide a secure, predictable attachment over time, somebody who is able to tolerate the emotions and affect that come with the trauma as it's being explored, if it's explored, and if that's what feels most comfortable to the client. The therapist is supposed to be able to provide what is called corrective emotional experiences, which basically help the client to rewrite what's happened to them in the past by offering them enough experiences with the therapist over time to make them to believe that attachment can happen without harm, without destruction, and without annihilation. In order to process trauma, we need to feel. TFCBT focuses on having 1, cognitive distortions, and 2, problematic core beliefs. The thing that survivors need the most is to be believed. So if you start to question your core beliefs in the presence of a professional, you're already reenacting the trauma. You're already in the place of sitting with an expert who doesn't believe you and is helping you to not believe yourself. And in terms of cognitive distortions, The best thing that somebody who is a trauma survivor can do is make peace with the thoughts and feelings that they have in their own mind, and to know that those thoughts and feelings will not hurt them over time, and that they are not a threat to themselves just because of what they've experienced and how scary what they experienced was. Here's some really important things to know about childhood sexual abuse in my experience as both a therapist and as a person. The first is that it takes a really, really long time to get better from it. If you get better from it, mostly we learn to live alongside of it and we start to feel safer over time. But there's nothing bad about it taking a long time. The bad thing is that it happened to begin with. That's the bad thing, the abuse. Secondly, there's not secretly some sort of perpetrator in you because this has happened to you. A lot of survivors of childhood sexual abuse feel like inside of them is also a hidden perpetrator, and they don't trust themselves and they don't feel like they're truly a safe person. I want to say that it's really possible with work and secure attachment and time to feel like there is safety both inside your mind and your body when working through childhood sexual abuse. And I think what else is really important to know and is super confusing is that when the child sexual abuse happened, our brains were not developmentally prepared to metabolize them. And actually, from that point forward, we've been confused about our age ever since. And we kind of walk through the world feeling like this duality, if not a multiplicity, of several ages at one time. We can feel like we're 45 years old and 7 years old and 10 years old. And they're coexisting and totally confusing because something about the development of our minds and the clock of that got really, really thrown off. And it's a lot of work to keep recentering yourself in the here and now, while also taking care of all of the different versions of yourself that show up, who are still trying to figure out what happened and trying to make sense of it. One of the major things we're taught as therapists is that we're supposed to help clients increase what is called their emotional literacy. And that's why you see this feelings wheel like everywhere, whether it's schools, therapy offices, even doctors' offices. There's a lot of buy-in to the idea of this feelings wheel. And I've been thinking lately about how infrequently I hear people describe their feelings as they appear on this wheel. And I've been thinking about the fact that this wheel really is a neurotypical construct. And beyond that, as the generations have sort of evolved, I think the way we describe our feelings has evolved quite a bit. So the main way that I hear people describe their feelings these days, are that people feel fat, they feel guilty, they feel like they're taking up too much space, they feel like nobody likes them, and they feel like they want to die. I would say those are the 5 main categories. And I know that as a therapist, we're supposed to be like, well, what's underneath that? What are you really feeling if you feel fat? What are you really feeling if you're feeling like you're taking up too much space? And I was thinking, like, what if we tried to stop refining it because what the client is saying is exactly how they feel, and it doesn't fall into the feelings wheel or the tradition idea of how emotions are experienced, but it's not any less valid. And in fact, if somebody says to you, like, I feel like nobody likes me, to try to find out what that really means is kind of invalidating to the fact that the person is saying, I feel like nobody likes me. And I wonder if trying to distill things down into the feelings wheel is a way of trying to move away from the really big feelings that clients are telling us that they're having, and us having to sit there and face them and sit with them without being able to just deconstruct them into like smaller pieces, because they are in fact that big, because right now things feel that intense.
Absolutely, Caitlin. You want to talk about how CBT is harmful? I got you, boo. First, let's start by saying this. If you use CBT and you're a therapist, cool. If you've been a client who's received CBT and you thought it was helpful, amazing. This is me and my personal beliefs of why CBT is harmful as a therapist who works through a somatic anti-oppressive lens. All right, number 1, it is not helpful for systemic issues, right? Such as racism, poverty, ableism. You cannot reframe your thinking on racism, and it is not a cognitive distortion. I just hate the idea of a cognitive distortion because there's nothing as disordered thinking. Number 2, it is not suitable for complex trauma. Just really people who are neurodivergent, right? ADHDers, autistic folks, right? It just doesn't work as well. Nah. If you're really self-aware, CBT just may feel kind of like bullshit to you, honestly. To me personally, I find it can be a little generic. It's these worksheets, and I'm not anti-worksheets per se, but I don't like it. It's kind of boring. It can be a little bit gaslighting to trauma survivors, right? Once again, using certain techniques to help to challenge belief systems and why this happened and what are the chances of this. Yeah, get out of here. We know more and more studies say that trauma is not a mindset issue. It is a bodily based experience. This is another one I personally, once again, I just don't think it's creative. It's very cookie cutter. People are too fucking amazing and you need to be stuck with a CBT. Yeah, don't like it. And let's be real, insurance loves fucking CBT. You know why? Because it is an evidence-based model to help people get in and out of sessions within 12 to 14 sessions. Yeah, no. And the reality is there are so many other approaches that are super helpful if you are a talk therapist. Using things like DBT, right? Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, right? Compassion-focused therapy, right? There are so many better options out there as well.